president of system support and managed IT service provider in Marshfield, Massachusetts. Forgive the pre-show banter. Most of that is just trying to fill up dead air before the actual fun kicks off. Help me warm my voice up, make sure the coffee's actually working. And today we're talking about vibe coding. And I think today's presentation is special as I think this is a great peek and for a chance for me to check my predictions in a couple months' time, to be perfectly honest. AI is obviously ubiquitous. You can't bump into any type of business news article without seeing that acronym anymore. There's tons of predictions about how will it change the economy? How will it change the business world? How will it do this? How will it do that? But I'm thinking a lot of when my dad started this company in 1989 because he was at an engineering firm north of Boston and noticed that this thing called the PC was showing up on a lot of people's desks because there was a lot of promise of work transformation, but things didn't really talk to one another, and the technology was so new that not a lot of people knew how to get them to do what they were supposed to do. So my dad found a niche within the company of handling this PC deployment for this engineering firm. And then all of a sudden, he goes to his bosses to say, hey, I have this whole new title for a thing that didn't exist a year ago, and I want to be compensated appropriately for it. And management laughed at him. And so that kicked off his entrepreneurial spirit. So here, system support originally got their start for helping deploy the PC to businesses, which wasn't completely brand new in the distant year of 1989, but it was starting to become ubiquitous. It was not well put together. You had to call people in their garages for drivers to install your Ethernet card to hook to a network. The internet wasn't really as easily accessible as it is today. But I think what we'll talk about today will be an interesting point in time here in August of 2025 of what is coming down the road for just knowledge workers, period. And that is what is affectionately known as vibe coding. And I'm sure this term will change, and it will have something different. But the idea at its core, and I think it comes from a tweet, and I really should have looked up who it was that coined the...
It's on a further slide, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. But the idea is that you can generate code from natural language. And what that means is that, let's say in whatever business it is that you do, that you wish there was some type of platform that worked the way you want it in order to get it to, you need a tool while you're working on the computer. You could be accounting, legal, flowers, bakery, it doesn't really matter. And, the idea is that you are an expert in your profession, and building software, testing software, knowing what you're looking at is beyond you do not have the time to spend 24 months deep diving into how to set up all this stuff and how to code and how to troubleshoot it. So the idea is that using, as if you were talking to another human being, asking it to build a tool for you. Yeah, there it is. Coined by Andre Kaparthi. See stuff, say stuff, run stuff. It mostly works. Now, I think that's a key port for today, is that, this is in its infancy. This is calling people in their garage type stuff. But I got to imagine that in a couple years, this isn't as much of a problem going forward. But what we can try and do today to take advantage of this is just starting this prototyping journey and getting used to working the tool, feeling the pain points where this doesn't make sense. This is kind of silly. This is missing the mark. And if you start when it misses the mark, when it hits the mark, you're going to be ready. You don't want to be, it's the, thinking about online advertising. You don't want to be too early with pay-per-click advertising on Google, but you want to be there before, each click costs you $1,500. So yeah, take your time. So I have even seen, and especially too, the idea of building internal tools and prototyping originally was saved for really big companies. Like Meta has built all their own internal tools, but obviously most small businesses don't have computer scientists sitting around with nothing to do, being paid way too much money to build whatever they want. But this starts to bring that same tool to us. So why should we care of, all right, if I can build internal tools, what does this mean? Speed is you can build in hours, not weeks. I mean, just wait until later on in this presentation, you can see how fast this thing types code out. It's uncomfortable. Lowering dev costs, really, the lowering dev cost point, what it actually is you remove now a software sales cycle. So, originally, I'll use for my example, like, making sure we're staying on top of warranties for machines is part of, what we do. How old is the computer? Does it need to be replaced, right? There are 4 or 5 software companies that handle that. With most of the information you can get from a website if you can plug in a serial number off the computer. And chances are you have the serial number already either in manual documentation or in one of the management platforms. So, looking at this thing of answering the question of how old are my computers, I use a company called ScalePad. Costs me $500 a month. I can probably build a tool that would then say, hey, why don't you just pull this warranty report and then send me an email every 2 weeks for every computer that's over 4.5 years old. Now, ScalePad does that for me, does it for my clients, costs me $500 a month. I had to evaluate the different vendors. I now want an annual agreement. I don't have to do that anymore. Now, provided I obviously have to take my own tool and then care and feed my own tool. So most of that $500 is making it someone else's problem. But as these internal development tools get better, you can just skip that sales cycle, and it's more about getting that job done. I have to answer this question for my clients. I have to do this service for my clients. Build me the tool that does it. And the non-technical users can turn around and build that tool. So, if you have a partner at the firm that is the visionary, has a lot of ideas, but just doesn't know the difference between C#, C++, and JavaScript, you don't need to. This will do it for you so that you can just go straight to trying to execute the vision. And yeah, sure, there's things you got to clean up. There is no free lunch, but you can scale unbelievably faster. So I like having these, especially when I have these AI things, really showing like the real deal while we're going along. Like, hey, when you go back and watch this, you can pause, slow it down, really actually use some of those tools. But unfortunately, I must admit a little bit, this one has some studio magic. So in previous ones, when we've built like the chat bots or, when we've built like the chat bot or doing some of the, co-pilot demos of really doing the step-by-step, I can't do that one here just because you do have to set some infrastructure up to make sure that when you're making software, it doesn't bump into the other stuff that you're doing. So this is set on an island, but I will show you for, you need an AI assistant, what API are you going to call from in order to do the, hey, do the AI thing. So, this ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude. Claude's what I'm going to use today just because try a third one. Why not? Try the different flavors, see which one wins. And then you do need a dev tool. So that's, a platform where, it can handle code, it can spin things up. So today I'm using Visual Studio Code, which is the Microsoft product. I'm using the Klein plugin. But there are other ones like Replibit, Cursor, and I mentioned Lovable as we were talking on the call earlier, as all that stuff is self-contained in one place. And again, I'm sure this webinar will be dated in a month, but that's half the nice part of recording is we can see just how much changed. And hey, what was I right about and what was I wrong about? So there are some real world examples of some of these vibe codings actually, going live. Jack Dorsey built BitChat, a decentralized application for voice and AI using talking to it. So, speaking as a human to the, the AI, and built a whole product over a weekend. Now, granted, Dorsey knows a little bit about what he's doing, but some of that, as you'll see later, it's like size of code base. You couldn't even type this fast in order to be able to do this. You've also got Otto's Grotto, customizing Shopify, being like, all right, Shopify has some great tools, but how can I make it just slightly better for myself? And built out wholesale pages, automated replies, started to really automate the way the business ran. Could have, tried to play the game of, all right, do I know anybody who's in computer science? No. Okay, well, can I go on Upwork and attempt to evaluate, a front-end engineer, back-end engineer, user interface engineer? And then you're trying to go through Upwork, do these people work? All right, now I'm trying to make sure that they actually get the work done and manage them. Did it all under AI and doubled his revenue in a year. It's pretty crazy. But for building these tools, and some of this for priming the pump here for the audience is the idea of, starting to think of just any crazy idea. Because honestly, if anybody here on the call wants to put like, could you build a blank app in the chat? We'll give it a go. Just because half of today is almost to the joke of the term for vibe coding is just going with whatever comes up. In case of the audience being too nervous to provide suggestions, I do have one, which is always, hey, make sure you always have a backup plan, right? But I mean, you can set these tools to, if you're on the IT side, you're running internally, you can build your own dashboards. I mentioned the asset managers for, things like, how often should I be turning over this equipment? You have lead forms calculators, things for marketing. That's what my backup thing today is Ryan graciously went and found quite a bit of data that was publicly available about some of our target markets. And, we need to get it crunched down to be able to, go into the marketing system and feed into the CRM for making sure that we can, start hitting those leads. But, does Ryan really want to sift through a couple hundred lines of, does this person fit, or could I have a machine do it even faster? And then just have a web page where when Ryan gets that data, he can just feed it in. And then if Ryan then wants to hire a high school student to do it, make it so that it's like, hey, just upload these spreadsheets, man. Operation scripts and scheduling. And then there's things for e-commerce as well, but that's not a huge part of our target market. And then obviously you can have form fills for, hey, maybe there's a quick logic flow for, helping out, if one of your technicians gets caught, frontline person who's used to handling customer service, all of a sudden they get a sales call. Maybe it's a tool that helps them navigate through the sales call because it's not a natural motion for them. So building a tool in 5 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and I'll switch over to the environment and I'll go through a few ways that I go to set this up. And please don't hesitate to raise any hands.
This might not be 5 minutes.
Yeah, it usually takes a little while. Most of it is, hoping it crunches and then waiting for it, hope that this is live. And I'm tempting the demo gods. But, you prompt it, AI writes the code, shows iterations, and then again, be prepared to tweak and guide. The first draft is never the final draft, but just taking a peek at the amount of progress is impressive. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and dive in. And the first thing, because I do try and show as much of the nitty gritty as possible, is, you'll hear Anthropic console.anthropic.com. I made an email, so I punched in my work email. I don't even have to remember a password. It sends a code to the email and I copy it in. And it takes me over to here. And what I did here was, I went to my profile here. I hit billing. I put in $20. And then when it hits $5, it reloads to 25. Because every time you go to reach out to this thing, it kind of charges every time you're putting tokens in an arcade machine, for lack of a better term. But I threw $25 in. That's not going to break the bank. I spent $20 on dumber stuff. And then you get an API key, which you guys can't see the key because it's my special key, but you can see how much doesn't cost a lot to do this. So I set all that up, and then hearing nothing from the audience for seeing what they want for like, hey, could you build a blah, blah, blah app? I had Ryan found this monstrous couple thousand page sheet, a lot of data in here. All of this is publicly available. Nothing here is special, for business names. And this was specific to medical and legal verticals. But, a lot of good data here: physical address, key executive names, titles, employee size, revenue per year, phone numbers, good marketing stuff, right? So I had the spreadsheet. I sent it over to the machine that actually has the code environment on it. And then, speaking really quickly, this is a virtual machine I have on a server on its own network here in the office, so that if anything happens to this thing, and just in case it wakes up and wants to destroy the world, it can't touch my normal network. So it's on a whole separate segment. It's a Linux computer to make sure that it just handles the coding parts fine. I installed Visual Studio Code. I'm remoted into it. And I installed this plugin called Klein, where Klein is where you prompt it, where you make the asks for it. And then you go from there for, hey, it will then take your requests and send it to Claude through those API tokens, and it goes from there. So I sent over to the downloads portion here. I had the full CSV file for the, first time I took the whole big sheet, and I'll do it again so you can see, there are some limitations, and I think it's important to know the limitations. And then I had to cut it up a little bit to get it to fit, probably the best way to put it. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive into it. I'm going to steal my prompt from when I've done this before, but up at the top, let's see, will it actually give me the see more for the task? So I had as the prompt, I copy over and I just go to a new one. I'll just redo it. I said, please create a web page that accepts a CSV spreadsheet of data, including business's name, physical address, key executive names, title, revenue per year, and more to prepare for upload to, I'll even adjust this to, keeps ARM with only the contact information necessary for marketing campaigns. Have the web page ask some qualifying questions for what demographics the user is looking to market to. Attached is an example of data the user might upload. So I'm going to add that first. This is the big one, 1.6 megabytes. It's a lot of data. That's that full spreadsheet. So I'm going to add this so that you can watch it break, just because I think sometimes knowing the boundaries is just as important as knowing what works. So I'm going to select that to attach to it. I'm going to put it in plan mode, because plan mode is going to have it logic through a little bit. And so when it plans, it thinks and it'll go, I think I'm going to do this. I think I'm going to do this. You could have some conversations with like, you used a blue and white color scheme. I was really hoping for gold and blue. Do whatever you want. Make it look like Facebook circa 2006, whatever your heart desires. And I've also set it to auto approve. Just let it run. If this machine crashes, I don't care. The limit for the Claude API is $20. I'm not going to run up $500 worth of cost. So I've put boundaries on what happens here. I'm not running this on my normal machine, so that if it builds something that goes completely haywire, it takes out the computer I need to do my job. There's a cost limit on the API for Claude so that my credit card doesn't go swoop, and then all of a sudden I've got thousands of dollars of API calls. Claude's answer at that point was like, well, you used the tokens, so you have to pay for them, and there is no forgiveness here. Like, you spent the electricity. Sorry. And then the third is, it's just on its own machine, separate network segment. So, especially is like, if I wanted this to be a real tool, I would then have to work to put this on a machine that would be, hey, all right, this is safe, it's controlled, and I know it's not going to blow anything up. So let's go ahead and prompt this, and this is going to break. We're going to go ahead and hit send. It's going to make the API request. This happens all the time. Can't read properties. Hit resume. Do it again. And so now I get an error that says, hey, I have a limit of 200,000 tokens, and what I gave it is 216,000 tokens. So a token is effectively how many things is it looking at that it has to put into context to start the large language model crunching it. So that broke with the big one, and that's because it was just too much data. So sometimes when you attach the example, it can have too much data. And that spreadsheet was, I think, 200-something thousand words worth of stuff. So I did have to pare it down. That was a little bit of manual work. So, but we'll go ahead and let's make the new task. So we're in plan mode again for it to plan it. But for the attachment, I'm going to take chop copy 2, which is much, much smaller. I'll go ahead and select that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the punch it in. So please create the web page. First API loves to crap out. This is how you can tell it's live. Or maybe it doesn't. Hey, look at that. All right, so now it's actually thinking. So it gives me a response back. There's already CRM data process. Let me get existing code to see what's already implemented. So it actually saw an old project. It wants to read the file. The auto approve allowed it to do that. The API request to read through the code base and see what needs to be improved cost me 3.25 cents. It read through a CSS file, so it picked the code base, did whatever it wanted. Went through that file for 4 cents. Read another JavaScript file for another 3 cents. Parsing through it a little bit. But even for what it's done, if we had an example of, let's take a company that maybe has an internal database developed by somebody else. You had worked with a custom software developer in the past, and they're expensive. They're $75 an hour. They don't get back to me all the time. I don't understand what they're saying. Everything's open-ended. And, I just have some questions about how this thing is set up. And, oh, well, you got to read the code base. It's going to take me 4 hours to try and understand what's going on. Mine read the file, and it cost me 3 cents to my credit card. So, and I did ask one thing that was different than before, where I said, hey, I want this to be ready for Keep, which is the specific CRM that we use. So this thing is it's going through the README file. So it read its own documentation, which is kind of funny. Yeah, so here's its own README file for like, hey, how is this thing set up? And I didn't type any of this. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. This is all 206 lines of that was written by a robot. So it finally finished up and says, hey, you already have this. Current features already match what you're looking for. An upload and processing demographics questionnaire. Keep CRM preparation. There's some advanced features for lead scoring, compatibility with sample data already. So, hey, what do you want to do? And then, of course, for some reason, the AIs just love emojis and just can't quit that. But, hey, since the application is already complete, here's options, test and use as is. Do you want minor customizations? Do you want a Keep integration? Or do you want some branding and UI adjustments? So let's please add branding by using our logo at systemsupport.com. Please create a section that integrates directly with my Keep CRM. Integrates so I don't have to manually upload the necessary data. Just natural language, as if Ryan was like, hey, all right, I built this thing. What do you want to do? So I'm still in plan mode. So it's going to think about what it wants to do for the best option. So I made that request. So, hey, if this is developing the statement of work, so again, pick on custom software developers again, it had, here is its response. So the integration, option 1, secure server-based backend service to securely handle the API, or a browser-based, where the user provides the Keep API, and then authentication, contact map, creation, tag assignment, duplicate handing. So I didn't even ask it to check for duplicates. That's a nice little feature that thought up on its own. Batch processing and progress tracking. So let's just say, so then it even has some questions for like, hey, there are a couple things I need from you. So I'll say I have a Keep API credential ready. I would prefer the more secure method. I'm not even going to use the technical terms. I'm going to go pure plain English. I do have specific custom fields in Keep where I a little better prepared. I probably would have uploaded a sample of it. But again, this is vibe coding. You're just going with whatever's coming up. You're just taking it as it goes. And this should replace the export step entirely. I would like a preview step for human review of the data, and I would like the program stored on my internal server. I mean, even this is asking if you want to use a cloud service. So, did you want to run this on something that isn't a machine in your office? So I'm going to go ahead and answer all those questions. I'm still in plan mode. Let me see if I can't quickly dig up a Keep API just for it. So one of the other big warnings here too is that if you start giving it API keys to your real data and you're just kind of doing whatever with this, you could screw up your actual data. So if you're hooking into existing databases, you do need to be cautious of, hey, don't plug it into something that's not gonna, don't plug it into something that you could start doing real damage to. So let's scroll up to where I had asked it. All right, so it has a complete plan: full stack application, secure server, system support branding, grab my website, updated the color scheme to match the brand, added the footer with company info, has a new server component, it has some new API backpoints. So it grabbed the APIs from Keep directly. I didn't have to tell it how to integrate with the website. It has a new workflow, previews the upload, hits the upload activation portion, and it has a new structure that it gives me an overview of, stored server side only, an env file. So it's going to clone and install. And then final questions are, so it'll have some questions for me down the road, but let's go ahead and slap it into Act so you can see this thing actually start whacking some code. So I'm just going to hit it Act mode and it's off to the races. So at some point, over to the right, you should start seeing it. So it is going to ask for running a command. So when it goes to run like actual terminal commands, it's going to ask you to say run. So, yeah, do it, whatever. You break this machine, no skin off my back. So, yep, go ahead, run the next one. Don't even have to type it. Making the API request back to Claude. And there it goes. I don't know about you, but I can't type that fast. Let's go into another file to update it. So this is where, this would be if you're looking at a computer science student and they're sitting there whacking away at their keyboard, the headphones in and that glazed look in their eye. That's the stuff they're typing. And just look how fast it's going. So far, it's cost me, and it's tracking the total project cost up in the upper right-hand corner. So far, what we've done has costed me 63 cents. And just think about the 63 cents on my credit card versus, how much would this have cost for a custom software developer? Now, granted, I can't yell at the machine that it doesn't work because, there's you are paying a software developer for a little bit of responsibility. But if you had something where you wanted to at least play around with and be like, hey, this little thing, is this process actually a good way of thinking about it? Does this actually solve a problem for me? Hey, does this actually help Ryan get marketing data that he got from the library into the CRM faster than going through and like, okay, I'm going to map this and crap, the headers on my upload sheet aren't correct. Yeah, again, it's just most of the part that I'm really impressed with is mostly just how fast this thing types. That's really the big one. So while that's whacking away, yeah, I see the question for if we're going to mess around and try it out, is it best to do it on a standalone computer? Yes. Especially with vibe coding, the IT portion that I warn of is if you're going to play around with it, think of it like the mad scientist's lab, where you're going to put it in its own building, and if it blows up the little test building that you're like, it was a shack. I don't really care. It's not the storefront. And then, if this thing asks for my actual Keep API, I'm not going to give it to it, because if the big thing to think about is if this program is going to write something, if it's going to add data to a database or something, that's where the big breaks should come out of saying, whoa, what's going on here? Because one thing I had built in here was a sentiment analyzer for our tickets, for hey, if one of my technicians making a client very angry, and, it found the sentiment analyzer, has the language processor, has all that stuff, and then just kind of, there were some problems from it actually parsing the ticket data. And then that's where the whole all right, I have to fight this thing a little bit to try and get it to read some data. But you want to put this in a walled garden, and then the data you give to it, you want to mess around and, let it, that it's not going to affect what you're actually, it's not going to affect something that would then cause disruption in your business. So a dedicated machine is a good one. For a lot of our clients, if you want us to set up a little test server, test machine to play around with it, we're more than happy to do that. We'll get it set up to the point where it's, hey, let's get your Claude account. We'll get VS Code set up. We'll make sure that you can connect to it. And then it's have at it. We'll see if this thing works. Because again, a lot of what we're seeing here now is, this is just Google in its first iteration. Yahoo search circa 2003. And then just think of what Google search does today. Or even think about, what the capabilities of the internet were circa 2008, 2007 versus what they are today. So I do see a question too for, hey, can you build a CRM? The answer is yes. You think of any software package you could possibly dream up, you could probably build it. You will run into some difficulties. So looking specifically at kind of, let's call them legacy software packages. So, hey, I want to build something for Salesforce, something like Salesforce without paying Salesforce prices. Okay. You could build out a whole CRM. It's hey, use this email service, use this. I want this workflow. It could do all that. But, just kind of thinking of for the project, you could have a scenario where, you're, hey, it starts to get a little complicated and you're trying to hey, where am I? why isn't this working? It fixed something there because it's just a machine. But I'm sure that some of this stuff in the future will be a lot easier. Here's another one. Yep. So it went to make an API call and bonked out. So gave it a little encouragement, told it to retry, see if it overloaded. It's entirely possible Claude's having some issues right now. But like I said, I'm tempting the demo gods. But hopefully the fun part of watching a bunch of the code stream across was already kind of fun. But I'm hoping it would get enough of it done so that I could at least show you like what a web page of this would look like. There we go. It got it. And it's kind of telling you what you're doing here a little bit. So, but yeah, most of it is just the speed at which it can type all that code is bananas. Just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the advantage is also just like, can I get a working version of this out quickly? And is it a viable thing? And then if it's something you want to keep around that is very useful, you can always like turn that over to someone else later as well and say like, I want a version of this that works like all the time, that can handle more of XYZ, do real bug fixing, real security on things.
Yeah, I wonder if let's see if I do switch, if I can switch to the, so this is the ticketing system one, which this should start. So just because that other one was taking a little while, I want to see if one of the web pages will at least launch so that I can show what it looks like. I'm doing something else. Run command is just gonna see if I can't start the web page. Do I have the web page up in Firefox somewhere else? That's how you can tell it's live, right? Not everything is already set up for. Where have I hidden my? None of them are open. That's disappointing. Oh, there we go. That should run it. It'll even give you pop-ups if you're doing something else. So like, hey, you can proceed. So I mean, some of this is just a live look at like what does this actually look like.
Yeah.
So is it super exciting? A little bit, to be honest. Just looking at the sheer volume of stuff that it can do, it's just I think it's pretty crazy. Dude, I'm hoping this thing would open up my. All right, claims it's would you run my web page? Just kind of letting it do whatever to see for it. Let's go back to the other one. I must only run one task at a time. I haven't been so crazy as to try and make it do 2 projects at once. But yeah, it looks like it only does 1 project at once. Good to know. But while that's running, I can. This is gonna open the web page. I'm hoping it would open the web page. See if localhost 3000 actually. Yeah, all right, it does run. Cool. So that thing I had built before for the service manager, now granted, it's running at like localhost, so this is it's just running an internal web server piece, but it built a whole web page. And you can play around with this however you really want. Oh, there it is. There it is, trying to launch the web page that I was just on. And it's funny. So this is an HTML web page. I can go to tickets. This is actually going to pull information from our ticket board. I'll look for everything that's open, see if it can't load. Okay, it has some. And I get an AI analysis for, hey, run the comprehensive analysis. Can you give me anything? So obviously some stuff, is a little rough. Like, all right, can't click away while something's running. So I'm kind of stuck here. That's not great. Ran into a problem. But you can kind of see that, hey, if I wanted to build a service manager, long story short, it cost me $14.75, and I have at least something I can start playing with. And then just for the heck of it, I'll go back to the other one and tell it to keep going on that one. But I realize I'm at 11:45, so I can get back to. I'll get back to some of the normal stuff we're looking at. So yeah, I mean, you can build a tool in relatively short time. It does quite a bit. And really, it's a tool to play with. Is it ready for prime time? Probably not. But again, it's getting started early with it is important because when it is time for the real deal, you're ready to go. And it's nothing new to you of, feeling like you're behind the wave or the curveball. So some best practices, I mean, one of them is definitely review the code. Is that beyond the scope of like most of what I've been talking about for non-tech people being able to code? Yes. But that's kind of my catch-all warning for, hey, you do have to take a look at it to make sure that it's not trying to record some data into some place you haven't seen. So I'm imagining a critical skill set still going forward for a lot of folks will be starting to like look at it enough to be able to go, that looks like, and you could even take that code base, take it to a whole different AI and have that AI review it and say, hey, is there anything here that, what's the concern? Is there anything here that sends this data to a sketchy IP address or a sketchy website? Is there any back doors? The things that you would be paranoid for, some type of software package. You could take that code, send it to another one to review. But I got to imagine there's going to be a cottage industry of just code review. Security scans, this is, the idea of you're building websites that are just hosted on wide open machines. When you use like the professional software, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into it to make sure the data doesn't leak out. Just remember that you're building something effectively in the shed out back. And that the idea is if it blows up, oh no, it blew up my $200 cheap shed that I got from Amazon. No problem, whatever. And then again, just if you touch highly compliant data, what I did today was publicly available marketing data. Our ticketing information is not like we're handling EPHI or PII and that, and then read it, that's fine. It's just reading it. But, if you're a doctor's office, financial, something to think about there for, trying to limit some use and really proceeding with caution. And then version control. If you have something that's a minimum viable product and you like where it is, and then you start tweaking it and you go, oh no, I've gone too far down the rabbit hole, have it copy and make version controls so that you don't break what is working. This is very tough to go back. And then just some risks to watch out for. Some of this, again, is just coding stuff. This inefficient or poor structure. My personal favorite is sometimes it will hallucinate certain commandlets for certain languages, or it'll use something that's very outdated. I'm going to be perfectly honest, a lot of this is above most of the scope of it, but I just have to put these risks out there to just say, hey, this is not a panacea. There is still stuff you have to look out for, and there still is some space for some of that expert in here. But, just the speed of it, of getting to at least like, is this a good idea? That's really what this is about, is just to start that conversation of, is this tool a good idea? And then I'm sure in an uncomfortable amount of time, we're going to get to the point where it is a good idea. And then missing documentation. Does it write a whole bunch of stuff and doesn't note absolutely anything about it? And then probably the most important is, if you build a tool that all of a sudden is a critical part of your business, and it is handling things that, you rely on, and if that thing doesn't do its job for 15 minutes, people start to panic. Be careful, because this also goes to even in organizations today that have internal resources that are able to build their own tools and use their own tools and deploy their own tools for managing their networks. And, I know some folks that have like internal reporting and internal ERP, all sorts of crazy internal tools, that's make sure somebody knows how to put the pieces back together if it does blow up, especially if all of a sudden the vibe coding tool becomes the thing that makes your business run. Because the vibe coder probably doesn't know how it was put together. And if there was someone who did know how it was put together, then that one person has all the information locked in their head. So I saw a question, what's the name of the vibe coding software we're using today? So yeah, quick recap. That was a Linux computer. So it was Ubuntu 24.02. So just a Linux distro. That way, a lot of the back end things are way easier to install on Linux rather than on Windows. And then I used Visual Studio Code as the coding environment where the code would get typed. I used the Cline plugin, CLINE. Make sure you use the real one, Cline.io. There are some impersonation ones on there that will try and siphon data. And then the API key for Cline sending the questions back and forth was Claude. So anthropologic Claude. So Linux operating system, Visual Studio Code environment, Cline.io plugin, anthropologic Claude API calls. And yeah, and for whoever asked that, more than if you're interested for setting up a demo environment, more than happy to help that. Because I think this is a cool tool and something cool to start thinking about. So next steps, ChatGPT or Claude really start, they can do some code stuff, but I will caution that for the environment, that's really where the rubber meets the road of, when you're having this thing write code and install things and make files, you want to make sure that it's doing it in a place that it does no harm. And that's why we encourage folks to book a discovery call, systemsupport.com/AI guide. And, if you do want to set up something like this, we're more than happy to be like, yeah, let's put this on its own box in the corner on a totally different part of the network, and you can get to it from here. And if this thing goes totally sideways, we go, quote my 15-month-old, go, and then just reset it. Yeah, because again, it's a tool we're playing with, and we're getting used to these first steps before it's really, we're off and launched to going from there. And then, yeah, we can talk about different prompts, tools, review, and yeah, it's an exciting time. I think exciting stuff is ahead. It'll be interesting to compare this recording down the road. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Are we going to laugh at how outdated what it is that I was doing, which I think I can already do based on that Lovable.
Yeah.
I had not heard about Lovable until that podcast I listened to on the drive last night. And that 8 months of 0 to 100 million in revenue, because it's a vibe coding platform that runs all online, which will be something interesting for me to explore. And that also goes to show just how cutting edge and new, and the dirty secret, nobody actually knows what they're doing. Most of what I'm doing today is just, hey, I've been playing with this thing, and I want to show you some of the opportunity and the things you can do while you're playing with this. But really, are there any other questions for what we did here today? And yeah, I just encourage folks to play with it, because it's just this, I think, is the real part of how AI will change things. Because we first looked at, just, we're used to just chatbots for, you open the chat GPT, you ask it, you have it tweak a little document or whatever. And I think that's pretty rudimentary. It's incredible, but a little rudimentary for what actually happens. I think this is the true promise of AI, where someone who has a vision of something that they want done, the AI brings that software to life of, I need a tool that does blank. And rather than slapping yet another $20 a month service onto a stack of software bills for revenue, you now have a skill in-house of resident vibe coder, or whatever that term's going to be, in 6 months. And, you ask them, and then away it goes. And then I think my industry, the MSP industry, we're going to, yeah, sure, we'll still have a bunch of help desk things that we got to do. Printers, there will be no updates to printers. I think, because that's a hardware problem. Unfortunately, I think printers will still suck well into the AI. But I can foresee that the MSP's role will then become setting up this environment for an infrastructure, and then saying like, hey, business owner, there are certain ways you're going to want to be able to do things and handle data and do this and do that. And these platforms of, maybe it's Lovable, maybe ChatGPT has to, OpenAI has to come up with something that's also a competitor. Maybe Microsoft gets its act together, and Azure AI Foundry actually is a better vibe coding platform. Who knows? It's all changing all the time. But I think our role will then turn into the stewards of that infrastructure, for saying like, okay, over here is the shed where you can blow things up. Right here is the actual storefront where, make sure the gas lines are up to code, and, the outlets next to the sink have GFIs and all the appropriate protections for that software are in place. And then, get a continuation of what we do now, making sure that, endpoints and data are secure, and we're helping folks get to the tools that they need to get to. But I could foresee my industry really changing into adding this to our infrastructure responsibilities. Any other questions out there, folks? I think I answered the vibe coding ones. With that, thank you so much to everyone for attending today. Really appreciate everyone's time, for hanging out with me. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Here's to hoping fall isn't here too early, rather chilly today. And yeah, let's see what the future holds. So get out there, play with it, and we're more than happy to help you set it up.
Yeah, and of course we've got the replay that'll go back over everything.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to loosely follow along.